Hi, everybody. Grab a Bible, open it up to Genesis chapter 16. Genesis 16. So, if I were starting a new religion, which is a fun game to play, by the way, and if I was charged with writing its holy book, which is a really fun game to play, there are some things I would purposely include in it, such as undying devotion to me. There are a lot of things I would keep out of that holy book. All of the foundational figures of this new religion would be perfect. They would all be spotless. They would be faithful to God from the day they were born. They wouldn't have these giant character flaws. They wouldn't have these huge lapses of judgment. They would be holy and righteous, people that you would admire and love to follow. The Bible does the opposite of that. It's one of the ways that you know that it's true, because it doesn't hesitate to include the sordid, wretched details regarding the lives and character of the men and women who are foundational figures of the faith. Think of the Apostle Peter. God love him. All the times he blew it, foot in mouth, he denies the Lord. To one point, he tries to stop Jesus from going to the cross, and Jesus calls him Satan. Not good. The Apostle Paul is a murderer, persecutor of Christians. That's not the guy that you want to paint in that picture as the guy who's responsible for taking the gospel to the world. King David, and this foundational figure, he was included in our prayer. He was in the psalm that you read. God has established this king. That's David, this primary monarch over his people, and yet David is quite famous for some notable sins. And that truth goes all the way back to Abraham himself. It's been mentioned in the last a number of weeks as we've walked through the last several chapters of Genesis that the three monotheistic religions on the earth, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, all claim Abraham as their father. So this is an important figure in terms of world religions in general. Now, so that there's no misunderstanding, Christianity is not a typical monotheistic religion of the world. We're Trinitarian. We don't believe the same thing that Jews and Muslims believe. Very unique in that regard. But you go back to the patriarch, Abraham, who's known in the New Testament as the father of faith. We are told in no uncertain terms that he made some huge mistakes. I mean, yes, he's admirable. Yes, he's a man of faith. He does very great things. But mixed in there is a normal man who sins. And that ought to be encouraging for us. Over the last several chapters of Genesis, we're introduced to Abram in chapter 12, when out of nowhere, God sovereignly calls him and says, "You're my guy." There was nothing in Abraham to deserve that. There was nothing about his life or his faith. He didn't have faith. He likely worshiped a moon god. And yet God says, "You're my guy. Leave your family, reject all of that, and I'm going to use you. Through you, I'm going to birth a nation, and they're going to be my own possession in the world. I'll be their God. They'll be my people. Whoever blesses you, I'll bless. Whoever curses you, I'll curse." And Abraham obeys. He goes. Chapter 13, well, at the end of chapter 12, immediately after his calling, we see kind of this first dip of Abram's character. They go to Egypt because of a famine, and there Abram lies about his wife and says she's his sister, and it's sort of a half-truth, and it gets him in trouble with Pharaoh. So he hasn't trusted God to protect him well, so he's already got kind of an asterisk by his name in the Hall of Fame. And then Abraham and Lot, chapter 13, will separate. Chapter 14, Abram kind of redeems himself. He takes his own army, which is just cool to have. Then he goes and he rescues all the people that had been taken captive, including Lot, his nephew, and his family. And they do this great thing. Melchizedek, the priest and king, blesses him. And Abram tithes to him, showing this great model and example to follow. And then last week you looked at chapter 15, which is one of the primary texts of the entire Bible, where God cuts a covenant with Abram. It's not just God calling him to do something. God unilaterally establishes a covenant with him. Abram goes to sleep. God cuts open the animals and is the only one to walk between them, showing that all of the conditions of the covenant are on God. I will take care of this. I will do, Abram, what you can't do. And from that point on, this is the man. And repeatedly, the New Testament will keep looking back to Abram and say, this is the model of faith. This is the guy that we look to as the example. Right on the heels of chapter 15, this pivotal text of how great and faithful Abram is chapter 16. And the bottom drops out. Let's read it together. Chapter 16, verse 1. Now, Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, and she had an Egyptian servant woman whose name was Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, now behold, Yahweh has shut my womb from bearing children. Please go in to my servant woman. Perhaps I will obtain children through her. And Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. And after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Abram's wife Sarai took Hagar the Egyptian, her servant woman, and gave her to her husband Abram as his wife. So he went into Hagar, and she conceived. Then she saw that she had conceived, so her mistress became contemptible in her sight. And Sarai said to Abram, may the violence done to me be upon you. I gave my servant woman into your embrace, but she saw that she had conceived, so I became contemptible in her sight. May Yahweh judge between you and me. But Abram said to Sarai, behold, your servant woman is in your hand. Do to her what is good in your sight. So Sarai afflicted her, and she fled from her presence. Now the angel of Yahweh found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, by the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, Sarai's servant woman, where have you come from and where are you going? And she said, I am fleeing from the presence of my mistress Sarai. And then the angel of Yahweh said to her, return to your mistress and humble yourself under her hands. Moreover, the angel of Yahweh said to her, I will greatly multiply your seed so that they too will be too many to be counted. And the angel of Yahweh said to her further, behold, you are with child and you will bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because Yahweh has heard your affliction. And he will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand will be against him, and he will dwell in the face of all his brothers. And then she called the name of Yahweh who spoke to her, you are a God who sees. For she said, have I even remained alive here after seeing him? Therefore the well was called Be'er Lahai Roi. Behold, it is between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram called the name of his son, whom Hagar bore, Ishmael. Now Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to him. He was doing well. And then not so much. The father of faith shows unbelieving doubt. And that ought to encourage you greatly. That if Abram is such a pivotal, foundational figure of the faith, he can use you too. So let's walk through chapter 16 together. A few different ways that the text presents to us the story. Number one, there's a disobedient detour, for lack of a better term. Verse 1 opens, if you look at it in the original Hebrew, which is super fun to do, the sentence literally opens with Sarah's name and closes with Hagar's name. And Abram's stuck in the middle. Yeah. Because that's the life situation that he's found himself in. Stuck between his wife and his now second wife. We're introduced to Hagar here. Where did she come from? We know that Abram has a large family, a lot of possessions. He's got 318 trained fighting men, we learned a couple chapters ago, in his own household. So we know this is a lot of people. But I would argue that we know where she's come from. In chapter 12, when Abram and Sarah go to Egypt because of the famine, and there Abram will lie about her identity, say that she's his sister. He gets in trouble with Pharaoh because God curses his house for taking Sarah as his wife. And once it all gets exposed, why did you do this? Pharaoh says to him, verse 18 of chapter 12. No, verse 16. Therefore, he treated Abram well because of her, and sheep and oxen and donkeys and male and female servants and female donkeys and camels came into his possession. You want to know where Hagar came from? She was a gift from Pharaoh in chapter 12. His foolishness of chapter 12, his sin and its consequence leads directly to what happens in chapter 16. His sin leads to Sarah's sin a few chapters later. So all this has come about. Hagar's now in the home. She's referred to multiple times as the Egyptian servant woman. And verse 2 sounds so foreign to our ears. Behold, Yahweh has shut my womb from bearing children. Go into my servant woman. Perhaps I'll obtain children through her. Verse 10 gives her to him as his wife. We see that and think that's insanity. And it is. You listen to the rest of the chapter, right? It's insanity. But this was a normal practice of ancient Mesopotamian culture. This was legal. This was common. This was normally successful. When there was a barren woman, this was very frequent. Take on a concubine, take on a servant woman, take on multiple wives, and through them, the primary wife gets to establish family with those children as their own. Michael mentioned last week the clay tablets from the ancient city of Nuzi. Again, we've uncovered clay tablets that are 4,000 years old in this ancient city. And written on them are ancient Near Eastern laws, including these. Of this is how you go about taking a slave woman to be your wife and bearing children through her, and what you can do with her after the fact. So we know this is very common. All that's around the time that Abraham lives. It's legal. It's successful. That does not make it God's will. Just because it's legal, just because it's culturally acceptable, just because it might be successful doesn't mean God would have you to do that. So she makes him this offer. He's shut my womb, take my servant woman. The end of verse 2, and Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. There's a phrase right there. He listened to the voice of his wife. That phrase is only used twice in the entire Bible. Do you remember where the other one is? You've already heard it. It's in Genesis chapter 3. After the fall, when God condemns Adam, he condemns him for listening to the voice of your wife. Now, don't make any sexist conclusions from that. Don't have conversations about your marital health tonight. And hey, God says it's sinful for me to listen to you. Don't do that. Don't blame me. I wash my hands of that. What this is telling us is Eden is playing itself out again. We've seen Adam, the original sinner. We've seen Noah become a type of Adam. After the flood, he immediately gets drunk and is sinful. And now Abram, the patriarch, the father of the faith, is playing out the exact same sin from the Garden of Eden. And you can, on the one hand, feel like you want to condemn Sarah for such a foolish thing, but at the same time, you can sense her desperation. Yahweh's closed my wound. We're told, again, the details matter, we're told it's been 10 years since Genesis 12 when God called them. After they've lived in Canaan now for 10 years, now what? Rabbinic tradition was that after 10 years of barrenness, the husband had the legal right to divorce his wife. The 10-year mark has come, and it's time for something to go down, and Sarah's getting nervous, and understandably so. So she looks at the culture around her and says, this is what I should do. This is how I fix this. And she blames God for it. Now, you can see it possibly as a positive. Yahweh has closed my womb. The Old Testament is very clear. Yahweh opens and shuts the womb. Children are born or not born because of him. Ultimately, he's in charge of that. We'll see that half a dozen times in the book of Genesis alone. But there's also a sense where it's really negative. It's not just that she's acknowledging the sovereign rule of God. She's bitter. She's angry. Because God made a promise 10 years ago, multiple times, read chapters 12 and 13, and again in 15, and he hasn't delivered for a decade. Isn't that frustrating? When we talk about patience, we talk about waiting on God, and we sing psalms that talk about waiting on God, but we can admit together, right? We hate every second of that. We know that God's up to something. We know that he's good, and we can trust him. Yes and amen to all of that, but it's super frustrating. God has made an explicit promise. I'm going to birth a nation through you, and they remain childless. 10 years, month after month after month after month, nothing but failure and disappointment. Verse 4, though, it seems to be successful. He went into Hagar, she conceived. Abram's not the problem. He's an old man, and apparently not past baby-making age. So, in response to that reality, Hagar lowers Sarah in the status that she once held. It's you. You're the problem, and I'm the solution. I don't know who thought multiple wives would be a good idea, but it's not. Because this is the kind of stuff that immediately happens. She becomes contemptible in Hagar's sight. Sarah's the favored one. She's the wife. She's that original chosen one. But now she's contemptible. If you go back to chapter 12, verse 3, and God's promise, original promise to Abram, I'm going to birth this nation through you. Whoever blesses you, I'll bless. Whoever curses you, I'll curse. The word for curse is the same word as contemptible right here. Hagar is cursing Sarah. I'm now above you. You are now below me. The servant has become the master. The master has become the servant. Not really, but that's what's going on in her heart. It immediately causes all kinds of problems, as if we didn't see that coming. Now, I read a book years ago that was really helpful to me. The years that John and I were together at a church in the St. Louis area for those 10 years, my predecessor was Kristen's dad. And he had brought me on to transition with him. He brought me on as an associate. He had been the lead pastor there for almost 20 years. And he brought me on with the sole purpose of, after a few years, we would swap roles. I was the ripe old age of 24, made perfect sense. But he was kind and gracious and humble to do such a thing. I am who I am today because of Rick. He's a very great man, appreciate him. But in this process of being on the staff, and there were a bunch of us, over 20 of us, and from one day to the next, I went from coworker to boss. If you want to mess with a relational dynamic, do that. So I stumbled across a book that was titled From Bud to Boss. It was helpful. I was a friend, the one you could just hang out with. Where normal we can complain about the boss together, and now that's me. And you can't complain about the boss to me because now you're in trouble. That's what's going on here. There's been a role shift. The dynamic in the home has been radically altered, and that has implications. Verse 5, Sarai said to Abram, May the violence done to me be upon you. Well, that ain't right. I gave my servant woman into your embrace, but she saw that she had conceived, so I became contemptible in her sight. May Yahweh judge between you and me. She blames him as if this was his idea. It wasn't, by the way. It was her idea. He went along with it, okay, but this was her call from the beginning. Let God judge between us. Yeah, you bet. Yeah, let's let him do that. Because we know what went down. Let God judge. When you read through the account carefully, you will notice Sarai never calls Hagar by her name. Ever. She never addresses her personally. She speaks of her as her servant. She mistreats her. She lowers her. The whole purpose of this was so that she could claim children through Hagar. I can build my family through her. Sarai never claims Ishmael as her son. Ever. In the entire text. She rejects all of this. Abram is not an innocent bystander. Verse 6, behold your servant woman. He doesn't say my wife, because that's what she is. Your servant woman is in your hand. Do to her what's good in your sight. He just washes his hands of it. He abdicates responsibility. She's your slave. I don't really care. I got what I wanted. You do what you want to do. So he mistreats her too. Does not treat her with the honor due to her as a wife. Gives her back as a slave like it's nothing. So your heart begins to go out to Hagar in all of this. She's already a slave, and now she's a pawn in some weird game. Do whatever is good in your sight. And what she does is wicked. She mistreats her and drives her away. She afflicts her. Verse 6, Sarai afflicted her. If you go up just a few verses into chapter 15, verse 13, where God informs Abram that all of your descendants that you don't even have yet, they're going to spend 400 years in a foreign land in Egypt, and they will be afflicted by Egypt. Same word. So isn't it ironic that Egypt's going to afflict Israel, and before that ever happens, Sarah afflicts an Egyptian slave? Do whatever is good that you see. This is a test of their faith. God made explicit promises. Are you going to believe it or not? Michael last week settled in on that key verse. Abram believed God, and God credited it to him as righteousness. And now, he's not believing anymore. He's trying to figure out his own plan. Times have gotten tough. I need to fix this. Number 2, gracious God. In the midst of all the foolishness, a gracious God shines. Go to verse 7. Angel of Yahweh found her by the spring of water in the wilderness, by the spring on the way to Shur. This is the first mention of the angel of Yahweh in the Bible. So we need to stop just for a second to talk about him. He will show up often, not just in the book of Genesis, though he will several times in Genesis, but throughout the Old Testament. The initial reaction to read the angel of Yahweh is that it's a separate figure from God. It's God's messenger. But the problem with that is the angel of Yahweh speaks as Yahweh. He speaks as God. He is worshiped as God. He is responded to as God. This is God in some sort of form. This is not his messenger. This is God coming to give the message. He is divine. There are those who would even argue this is the Lord Jesus. We know what God in human form looks like. We know who that is. That's Jesus. And he has shown up here. He found her, meaning he was looking for her. He was sent for her. He came for her. And she's sitting by a spring on the way to Shur. Shur is on the way to Egypt. She's going home. She has left Mesopotamia, she's left Canaan, and she's going back home to Egypt. This same spring is mentioned in Exodus chapter 15. But Moses and Israel, after they've come through the Red Sea, are coming the other direction. They're coming out of Egypt, and they go through the wilderness of Shur, and they come by the springs of Elim, and they sit and they drink. Long before that ever happened, Hagar had sat at the same spring in the same wilderness and drank. Verse 8, Hagar, Sarai's servant woman, notice he does not address her as Abram's wife. Just because it's culturally acceptable doesn't make it godly. God does not acknowledge her status as wife because she's not. Sarah's the wife, not Hagar. Where have you come from? And where are you going? Now, God is not asking that because he's genuinely ignorant of that information. He knows exactly where she's come from. He knows where she's going. He's helping her to see, how'd you get here? What's going on? God did this in the garden. Adam and Eve sin. They hear God walking in the garden. They hide. And God says, where are you? God is omnipresent. He knows exactly where they are. You can't hide from him. He's not asking for information. He's asking to help them understand, what have you done? How did you get to this place? That's what he's doing here. Then he tells her, verse 9, you need to go back. Don't go home to Egypt. Go home to Abram and Sarah. Go back to Canaan and humble yourself under her hand. That's a big ask, don't you think? She's already been afflicted. She's been mistreated. She's fled. Go back on purpose to the one who has mistreated you and submit to her, because that's wrong and so is your heart. This elevation of your own status was sinful, Hagar. This upending of the status of the home, you did that. That's wrong. Go back and let's make this right. Be humble. Verse 10 becomes the critical part of the text. Moreover, the angel of Yahweh said to her, I'll greatly multiply your seed, so they will be too many to be counted. The angel of Yahweh said to her further, behold, you're with child, you'll bear a son, you shall call his name Ishmael, because Yahweh has heard your affliction. He'll be a wild donkey of a man, his hand will be against everyone, everyone's hand will be against him, and he will dwell in the face of all his brothers. God doesn't have to do any of this. She's an Egyptian servant. She's not part of the covenant. She's not going to become an Israelite. This is not the line that God has chosen to bless. God could absolutely ignore her and let her die in the wilderness. God could not. He could close her womb. He could not allow her to have this child. God could cause all kinds of things to go down. He certainly doesn't have to multiply Ishmael's line to rival Israel. But he does, because he is a gracious and kind God. He will bless, he will do a mighty work, even for those who are not in his line, because God is loving and kind. You're to name him Ishmael, means God hears. God has heard you. Therefore, name your son, God hears. Every time you call his name for the rest of your life, you'll be reminded of this moment when God heard you. He'll be a wild donkey. In case you're wondering, that is not a positive title. He's going to be unruly and he's going to be violent. And as we walk through the rest of Genesis, we'll see both of those things come true. He is unruly and he is violent. His hand will be against everyone. Everyone's hand will be against him. They're going to fight constantly. He's going to be this unruly, violent fighter. No one will get along with him. He will get along with no one. That's absolutely true. He will dwell in the face of his brothers. He will antagonize. He will constantly be there. He won't go away. And I guarantee you that if you go home tonight and turn on the news, you will see that still at play right now. And the the world in which we live, it's known as the Arab-Israeli conflict. It's been going on, not just in your lifetime. The Arabs who come from Ishmael's line and Israel haven't just been fighting for a couple of centuries over this little plot of land in the Middle East. They've been fighting since Genesis 16. When you go to the airport and have to take off your shoes to go through the security line, blame Abraham. It started in his living room. All of this global fighting begins here. Friends, sin has its consequences. Now again, let's be reminded, she's foreign. She's not Israel. She's not part of the covenant. Her son is not the elect line. Isaac is the elect line. The son of the promise is coming. It's not him. In fact, we'll see in just a little bit, Abram is going to beg God, will you make Ishmael the line? And God says, no. That's not my plan. That was your plan. My plan will always win. Isaac is coming. God's still going to bless. He's still going to do mighty things. Even in the midst of Abram and Sarai's sin, God shows his grace. Romans 8:28 is still in my Bible. And God works all things together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. That's what he's doing for Abram and Sarah right now. That's what he's doing for you right now. He's working all things together for his glory and your good. Verse 13. Then she called the name of Yahweh, who spoke to her, you are a God who sees. For she said, have I even remained alive here after seeing him? Therefore the well was called Be'er Lahai Roi. Behold, it's between Kadesh and Bered. So she acknowledges this is Yahweh. She knows who this is. He's revealed himself to her. It seems like at times when you read books like Genesis that God shows up all the time. That it would be so cool to live in those days that there's just physical manifestations of God everywhere. That's not actually true. It's very rare that any human being sees this revelation from God. And those that do, it's a very select, small group of people. And when they do, it's sometimes decades apart. These aren't weekly, monthly occurrences. This is once, maybe twice in a lifetime, only for a handful. And Hagar is one of them. Sarah's not. Because of Sarah's sin, Hagar has a worshipful encounter with God that Sarah should have had. She should have fallen before the Lord, the one who opens and shuts wombs. Says, reveal yourself to me, please. Hear me, see me, fix this. You've made promises, but she doesn't do that. She manipulates her own plan to try to fix it herself. Oh, how tempting it is to do that very thing. He is the God already who hears Ishmael. Now he's the God who sees. You see me. And she's in awe of the fact that she's still alive. God has shown up. He saw me. He's heard me. And I'm still living. So she renames the spring, this well that's there, that would literally translate, well of the living one who sees me. What a monument to the faithfulness of God. So be encouraged. In the midst of sin, in the midst of foolishness, in the midst of us trying to figure things out on our own, gracious God delivers. He loves and he works. Number 3, faithful follower. Verse 15, so Hagar bore Abram a son. Abram called the name of his son, whom Hagar bore Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to him. You see the repetition of Hagar bore. This isn't Isaac. This isn't the line. That line's still coming. But there's a child now. He's going to be blessed because he's connected to Abram. God's made a covenant with Abram. Everybody connected to him will be blessed, and that includes Ishmael. Abram names him. That's significant because that's Abram claiming him. Sarai never claims him. Abram does. This is my son. So, to fill in the gap, what's happened between verse 14 and verse 15 is Hagar was obedient. She went back. And she submitted to Sarah. Maybe she apologized. She grew more humble. She had been in the presence of God. That tends to happen when you do that. And she informs them of this worshipful encounter that she had in the wilderness of the God who hears and the God who sees. And Abram believes her. And when that baby is born, Abram's obedient. And he names him Ishmael because that's what God said to name him. God does hear. He does see. This account is what it looks like to walk by sight and not by faith. We can throw that out all the time. You're supposed to walk by faith, not by sight. Well, what does that even mean? Genesis 16, that's what that means. What they did with Hagar is walking by sight. I can do this. This is my plan. I can fix this. I'm impatient. I'm bitter. I don't believe that God's going to deliver like he said he's going to deliver. That's walking by sight. Walking by faith is acknowledging he made promises. He's going to keep them. I just need to keep going. As hard as that may be. And this is a long road for Abram. We're 10 years into this journey with him. And for a long time still to come, we're going to be tracking these years with him to watch how long it takes for God to deliver on this. And we've already seen him take this incredible journey. God calls him. He's unfaithful there. He's obedient, and then he's unfaithful, and then he's obedient, and now he's unfaithful. And he's learning his lessons as he goes. But the road's not over yet. He's got a long way to go. We are introduced to him in chapter 12. We're told that he's 75. 10 years later, we have chapter 16. He's 85 when the pregnancy happens with Hagar, 86 when Ishmael is born. But the line of promise, the son of promise is still to come in 14 years. He's got a long way to go. Walking with God is not a sprint. It is absolutely a marathon. One step, one day at a time. He's just getting started. God hears. It's ironic, and I think it was Michael last week. I listened to all the last several sermons. I'm so grateful for the guys who did that. It was so good. But one of them brought out how ironic it is that Moses is the one writing Genesis. God is revealing Genesis to Moses, and he's the one penning it. And I have to imagine that when God is revealing this information to Moses, because obviously Moses is not there, he's a long way off from this, and he's writing down the story of Hagar. And these stories have passed down the line, and he hears, name him Ishmael. God has heard you. Because it's Moses in Exodus chapter 3 who sees God at the burning bush. Do you remember what God says to him? I've heard the cry of my people, and I'm sending you to Pharaoh to tell him to let my people go. This man knows that God hears. And that truth that God hears leads to the Exodus and the picture of redemption. God's people are in bondage and slavery to a foreign enemy, and God crushes them and delivers them safely to the other side. That is the dominant theme of the entire Old Testament. God constantly, from Genesis to Malachi, refers back to Egypt. Remember what I did for you in Egypt when I brought you out of the iron furnace, when I carried you on eagle's wings. He uses all this language. I've redeemed you. I've set you free. And that dominant image of the Old Testament leads straight to the cross of Jesus Christ. God's people are in bondage to sin and slavery and death. And God has heard their cry and has come down to rescue and delivers them safely to the other side. What a gracious and kind God. Let's pray. Father, thank you for glorious truths. You are so abundantly good to your people. You use even our sin, our foolish decisions, our mistakes, the hurts, the pains, the disappointments, the frustrations. You use all of that to weave together your incredible plan. We have no idea how you do that, but we're in awe that you do. We're so grateful that you work all things for the good of those who love you and are called according to your purpose. Thank you that we get this glimpse to learn from, of walking by faith, not walking by sight. And thank you for this truth that you are the God who hears. You are the God who sees. And because of that, you're the God who saves. So as we do every time we gather together, we take communion, we remind ourselves that this is true of you. This is true of us, that you have heard, you've seen, you've delivered, you've redeemed us. So we take a piece of bread and a cup of juice and we remember the sacrifice of Jesus on behalf of sinners like us. Thank you for him. It's in his name that we pray. Amen.